Right. Okay.
Good.
So we are here today to do an interview with Juliet Merchant, who's the composer for Empathy and Eternity. We're going to chat about your involvement in the film, how it came about, how the process of making the score went, feelings about the film, how it connects with your wider discography, and a few other things about upcoming screenings. Firstly, for people who aren't aware, tell us a bit about yourself, your background, everything like that.
Okay, my name is Juliet Merchant, as we just said. I am a composer mainly for film, doing a master's at Oxford University, where I've been experimenting much more with my music, which has been really fun. But my main background in film music has been with Soviet silent film, with a company called Klassiki, and the NCCA, which is the National Center for Cinema in Armenia. And I have done 7 silent films over the past 8 years, which has been super fun.
Nice.
And I've also done TV production libraries as well. I'm signed by EMI, and much more.
And Warner, wasn't it Warner as well?
What, Paramount?
Yeah, Paramount.
Yes.
Yes,
that was also super fun.
Nice.
Yes.
And some documentary stuff in there as well, right? In terms of the older kind of work you've done. The first one was like...
Yes, that's very true. My first film was about Natalia Osipova, who is the prima ballerina of the English Royal Ballet, and she's incredible, and the director Jerry Fox did a documentary about her. I did the soundtrack for that, and that was super fun. So definitely a background in documentary making as well.
Was that kind of the first project that you did around 2019
Yeah,
then?
absolutely. That's how I got into all of the Soviet stuff. I was in Russia. I knew one of the editors, or I met one of the editors in Russia. We started on this project of Natalia Osipova, and then the producer of that film liked the work that I did, and that's how I got into the Soviet films after that. And it's been a long and fruitful collaboration with them. It's been super fun.
And pre-Oxford this year, which is also where we are today, obviously in the Oxford kind of music studios. What was your kind of background after Russia?
After Russia? Well, that all immediately happened after Russia, but I suppose before Russia, I was just experimenting in Ableton, having a bit of fun. I really liked orchestral works. I've always been a pianist by trade. I play classical music, and that was very much in my most experimenting phase. But it's always kind of been, I would say my style's always been fairly soundtracky. I've been very influenced by game and film soundtracks growing up, so I think that's kind of how my head works, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of infiltrated your head a bit and formed your sound.
Definitely, yeah.
And your sound has kind of become much more experimental this year. So would you kind of root it mainly in game and film? Would you also like attribute it to particular composers or any particular influences that you feel have come through?
So I really like Lackerman's use of deconstruction within his orchestral works. I've found that I'm particularly interested in both film music and experimental music in texture. I think that's generally how I see music. I visualize music in texture when I create things. And I've really kind of put that to the test this year, kind of trying to use as much extended technique as possible, creating my own technique as well. That's been super fun and super weird to do. I would say very much this has influenced my film music, but it's still separate. These are sort of parallel genres that I both enjoy very much so. But I would say my sort of independent music, so without a visual medium, is more of a social commentary. I find that interesting. Yeah.
So it very much stands apart from the kind of work that you've been doing in film and the rest of it.
Yeah, very much so.
Kind of fits very much within the overall kind of sound and approach, and almost like 2 streams of experimentation.
Yes, I would very much say so.
Yeah.
But in that kind of same breath is my film music, I think, has become a bit more experimental. Just in types of instrumentation I'm using, the type of harmony I'm using. I really like weird dissonant harmonies and microtonal music as well. So that's sort of been added to my repertoire this year, and how things have transferred over as well.
And I guess we can get into how the kind of sonics of the score that you've made for Empathy and Eternity
Mm.
played out. But I guess firstly we can give people a bit of context of how you got involved. So
Mm.
obviously I approached you at some point. I don't really know when it was, because I came up with a project in like September 2022.
Mm.
I think I probably got in touch with you somewhere late into 2022, maybe early 2023,
Mm-hmm.
over message,
Mm-hmm.
and asked if you wanted to be involved. And you were doing quite a bit of work at the time and didn't really have capacity. And then eventually, when things were kind of a bit further along, and I think I'd arranged all the kind of accommodation. I think I'd arranged accommodation for people, and the film was kind of gonna be shot. Everything was there. Then we met up, and you kind of came to me. I remember quite clearly being like, so what would you want from me,
Mm.
like in an ideal scenario? And I think, at least in my memory, I was kind of like, oh well, we kind of like had this discussion and it's like it's all good kind of thing. But then you're like, no, but what would you want? And I was like, oh well, like maybe a score. And then you were kind of like, I'm down.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of do you feel eventually swung you to wanting to be involved?
I think because this is your debut, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
This is your first ever film.
Mm-hmm.
So when you came to me and like, I have this idea, and I was kind of overwhelmed with work, and we only kind of spoke on text. Of course, texting is just never good.
Yeah.
And I was sort of like, okay. But then I met you in real life. I saw the commitment and I saw the passion. I know it's cheesy to say, I saw the dedication in your eyes. And I was like, I can feel in your heart what you're trying to do. And I see why I'm so important to this project as well. And obviously you're such a good friend of mine. We've known each other for so long. It just kind of, I think the understanding of what you were doing and the commitment to the project. Because I think my one worry with filmmakers who've never made a film before, things can get a bit, they have all these great ideas, but things don't pull through. And then you can like put so much work in and then things kind of fall flat. But I saw that wasn't going to happen. And I was like, right, we're going to make something good. Then let's make it then. Like, let's do it. I saw you wouldn't let it go underwater, if you see what I mean. So,
yeah, for sure.
yeah.
I always say to people that there was no world that existed in which I wasn't going to make it.
Exactly.
That's kind of the approach, the
saw
feeling
that.
more than anything, I suppose, that I had.
I saw that.
And obviously I think it's worth also, saying why I originally approached you, which was like on top of the fact that you obviously extremely talented, and I was already aware of that, and kind of following what you were doing. There was also the fact that, as you mentioned, we've known each other for quite a while, since like 2017 in Russia. And that at that time one of the ways that we connected was a shared experience of losing our fathers at a young age. And obviously the subject of this film very much is related to my pilgrimage in the kind of footsteps of my father, searching for answers, searching for closure. So on my side, there have been multiple moments in the process of making the film where I have had particular ideas or particular desires that I have felt are impossible to compromise on, and having you involved was one of them in my mind. So I'm very glad that you came around.
I am so glad to be a part of it, absolutely.
Yeah, nice.
And that's something I admire about you so greatly, and that shone throughout the project, is your ability to connect with people and connect them to your project and make them enthusiastic about your project. But that comes from you, that comes from your spirit, your ability to, I don't know, I suppose literally just connect with people and inspire people. People were inspired every single time, and you, by the end of the project, I swear you knew everybody in Tenbury Wells. There wasn't a single person who didn't know your name. You had this energy. It was like I don't know, it's just something, and it's impossible.
Yeah, it's the kind of essence itself, really, isn't it, of life? And it's funny, I do feel like I know more people in Tenbury Wells than I know where I'm from. But I think that kind of energy is very much supported and matched by yourself, and I think that very much kind of comes through in the score. And it's hard to kind of quantify almost, but there's a quality to the score. Having listened back to it so many times, that I just feel absolutely perfectly matches the way I felt and the way I thought, and I really do feel like the film couldn't exist without it. So in that sense, I think that the energy that you put forward as well was integral to making it what it was. It's not. It's as much a result of your work as it is of mine in a way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, yeah. In terms of like making the score itself, I think that would be a good thing to kind of touch upon.
Yeah.
So you actually went to Tenbury Wells before I did. Obviously, I did my original pilgrimage in 2022, but when we went to film at the end of July 2023, going into August, you were there before me. So those kind of first few days, you were just kind of camping, hanging around and stuff. And it was kind of when I arrived that we started to kind of get a feel for the place, really, right?
Yeah.
So what were your kind of initial impressions about Tenbury as we kind of went round together and did a bit of a recce, essentially?
I mean, it's a wonderful place to be. It's a cozy English town, where everything feels quite quiet. And you have the river flowing through, and you have the little shops, and you have the marketplace. There's quite a strong sense of tradition there. You feel like all the locals know each other. There's a sense of community. It's sort of like idyllic in that fashion of kind of, I think, what a lot of us want, especially in the big cities. It's really nice to it feels very safe and cozy there. But I think when you came, you sort of illuminated at least its importance to our project. When you took us around, you said, here's this place, like that. Then the history comes alive, which was wonderful to be around and really influence the music, I think, in that regard.
Yeah.
So.
I remember when we were in St. Mary's Church, but not the one in Burford, the one in Tenbury, and you were playing the piano as we were kind of going around, and I started crying, and I remember just thinking at that moment, she totally gets it, totally understands, like, so grateful that this has kind of worked out, and this is gonna be incredible. This specifically, I don't know about the rest of it, but I know that the music is just, it's already sorted, it's already like in place. I definitely think there was a strong energy from the beginning. So how did you kind of conceptualize the more, sonic side of things as we start to go around? How does any of it start to like form in your mind?
So I guess, again, as I was speaking about earlier, texture is always important to me. And just walking around Tenbury, you kind of see the different colours that people see. You see the different textures of the stone in the walls, or the types of trees that are around, and what the churches look like, and the kind of acoustics that might happen there as well. I think that has a big impact on me when I'm there. But I suppose the greatest impact was being in the churches, being in the exact places. Like I remember at Burford House, for example, and you have such just very pleasant scenery. Everything's very trimmed and kempt. That really affects things. But then in the churches, you have this beautiful reverb and acoustics, and of course it's about your father. And I think, I don't know, voice just really stuck out to me in that moment. Solo voice, female solo voice, sort of, I mean, maybe in a bit of a stereotypical sense, a more angelic voice, quite literally, which you can hear as a motive throughout the music. Those are my initial thoughts when I'm thinking about it. But the film is, it has dark motives about it, death, and there was quite a lot of struggle for your father as well. He didn't have it easy, and war is the backdrop of this entire setting, which was obviously very disturbing. But there's also a deep theme of serenity and sort of this hopefulness, this sort of breaking free of that at the same time. So you might notice in the film there's a lot of tension building, but it will ease up in these kind of two flowing states at the same time. yeah, that's essentially my intention for the piece. But I suppose it's also fairly ambient because we wanted the talking to be at the forefront, and the music to take more of a backseat. The music itself isn't, just because there's so much information to convey verbally as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very dialogue-heavy film, and I think there are moments where there's very strong ambience, and like you said, the kind of almost push and pull between serenity and darkness that I feel is where your emotional force really comes through as well, and which is, I think always something of a similarity between us. And I think that those moments work together so well, and I think the final kind of augmentations of that and little bits of Foley and stuff by Gonzalo also added tiny bits to that as well, emphasizing the more ambient parts, kind of the wartime setting and stuff. And that also worked really well at kind of even further emphasizing the kind of ambience of your score. I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, and I guess, it's also worth mentioning that a lot of the score was not just kind of, composed digitally on location, but obviously there was actual sound recording that was done in the churches, with great thanks to the Tenbury ministry, who really helped us with that in both Burford and Boriston. So how was that kind of side of things with the organs and, the violin and stuff?
Oh, that was great fun. Yes. That was a wonderful moment with James, actually. I think for me that was one of the most moving parts. I mean, visually it's very moving as well. Like, you're going up to pray. I loved that actually so much, and to have a live acoustic version as well, because I take a lot of pride in the samples I use, and I think they're very high quality, but there's something, and it reminds me of the memory of playing there as well. That was really, really great fun. But I don't think I used that much organ there, whilst we were in a lot of churches, and I wonder why.
But I kind of think the fact, it's in the kind of penultimate scene where I'm starting to kind of enter a ritual of closing and, entering the gates, the lich gate, the gates of resurrection once more, and giving thanks for death, and kind of going into this state of prayer. I really feel like the fact that the organ was reserved for that scene makes it all the more poignant. I think that to have an organ anywhere else would kind of, remove a level of the poignancy of it. And that's also where the editing comes in. The fact that James was the violinist, but also like the refining editor, after Beatrice, did such an incredible job with that sense of musicality that he has as a violinist. I know through my conversations with him, and I think you might have had a conversation with him at some point too, the musicality of your work was kind of mirrored in his editing. And in that scene where the organ is used, that's so apparent, because it comes in as I open the door to the church, and I think that, I don't know, that's one of my favorite scenes for that reason, one of my favorite moments of the score. The use of it, and I think the moment itself, like you say, is very special to be playing those instruments, and they're very old instruments as well. They've been there for so long and used in service. But also when we were in Boriston, we had the church warden and her husband. We had the woman who lives at Boriston Mill, where my father lived for 2 years during the war, sat outside, in the night, just looking at the lights of the church and hearing you and James play. That's incredibly special, not only for us, but for them as well. It's a very rare instance, and I think it's also like using a space which, unfortunately, like many church spaces, is less and less used and less appreciated. So I think that, the power of your music lies not only in the product that you've made and the role, that plays in cementing the film and conveying the messages of the film, but also the kind of lived experience of the community whilst we were doing it, you know. So I think it's also something to like consider in what you've done, you know, the fact that music brings people together, not only in the product but the actual process too.
That is so true. That is so wonderful. Yeah, it really was like a lot of connections were made, and I think they really influenced, because when you make these connections on set, you start kind of considering how they would maybe want to view the film as well. It's their place, it's their history too. So if, like, you know, if I made something that I think these people would be like, that's really weird, yeah, I don't know, it influences you. It's all these tiny influences, which is why I was so glad that I came for the whole, pretty much the whole time. That was, like, you know, so important. But I think, yeah, thinking about the organ I think has such a vivid image of churches, but this isn't actually about churches. I think if it was organ the whole time, we'd kind of think about religion and churches and maybe funerals as well. It's not about that. It's about your emotional journey. That is what this documentary is actually about. I know we have a lot of dialogue, and sorry to out you on an interview like this.
Please do.
And of course, it's about many things, but actually, I think that is what I was going for, really. Yeah, and actually, the main motive is the voice, the vocal melody, which comes back. It starts at the beginning and it comes back at the end in a lower and slower tone as well. And I think that is about you. That's what I wrote, maybe about your journey. So
yeah, all the roads kind of lead to that, as we were saying earlier, all the threads of the story, the medieval part of the church, the kind of Tenbury community in World War II, and I think also the modern aspects of the kind of local communities. They all kind of converge in the narrative of my journey, and me coalescing all of these kind of threads in order to make a cohesive attempt at some sort of closure, poetic and historical justice. And yeah, again, I think your score does an incredible job of capturing that.
Thank you.
How do you feel about the kind of post process then? Was there kind of much to do afterwards as well, when you were not in Tenbury Wells anymore?
Yes. So I did a Raymond scene later, and there were particular moments that needed to be extended musically, although James did a very good job of looping some sections and like adjusting the music to the new times. Because this was a very unusual process of when I wrote the music before the final cut was made, but it was just because, you know, we wanted something written during production on set. And it was quite strange to come back to it, and I think it was harder not being on set, especially the emotional parts. Raymond, actually, I think was easier, because I think I was so focused and sucked into this very like spiritual journey that Raymond's funny stories was quite it was such a change that I think emotionally I was sort of like, but we're going through a series of death, but Raymond is funny. Like I couldn't quite fit both of them in my head.
Raymond.
So I think Raymond was actually easier, more detached, but yeah, I kind of had to take a moment to go back, but it's very easy to do that as well, because I remember on the first screening when it was pretty much finished, I just like do you remember when I wrote you all that those notes?
Half of them were like I'm crying.
I just was crying so much, and there was a few more bullet points and I was like still crying.
Yeah.
So it was very easy to go back there, and I wanted to still do it justice and even put more emotional power in those moments, especially when you're burning the tag in the secret place, and it's going off then. I think that's a real moment for me personally that I found very moving.
Precisely, yeah. It was just those 2 points really, wasn't it? The weir and the final scene where you kind of added a little bit more ornamentation almost, just to kind of drive home the emotional poignancy. But apart from that, and Raymond, that was kind of it really in terms of after being on set. And I do think that that's for the best, because like you say, so much of the power comes from the presence and the emotional weight,
yes,
good and bad, that those places and people and stories hold. As well as, of course, like the actual stresses of production.
Yes,
you know,
it's true.
and it is super stressful.
I remember you had your I don't even know what to call it.
It was
Drag box.
It was a huge kind of like I don't even know, like luggage train.
Yeah.
And my brother's luggage train, and he bodged it together with paracord because the wheels were broken. So I was lugging around this bodged up luggage train filled with like film equipment and props and stuff. It was heavy as well.
Yeah, it looked
Honestly,
it.
I felt like Sisyphus.
But this is what I mean about your willpower. You like looked like it weighed nothing, and you're just like, right, off we go, let's go.
Yeah. But I appreciated the weight of it. You know, I think. I think feeling the physical weight and that kind of physical labor was, you know, one of the ways of kind of processing and exercising in both the sense of exercise and exorcism. You know,
exorcism.
Yeah, the
Wow.
kind of, you know, feelings, you know, the grief and the loss and, you know, the depression that I was in at the time and all that kind of stuff. So I was actually very, very happy to do that. And strangely enough, it never fatigued me. You know, it would have gone anywhere, like the rest of it. But yeah, it was a kind of, it's a funny process, and I mean that's obviously part of the kind of low production cost that was associated with it. You know, we're very lucky to have most of the equipment, for you to have what you need, for us to have Foley recorders that were high quality, good cameras, all that kind of stuff. That kind of made things a lot easier because it was very low budget. Would have been a much easier process if we had a car.
Oh yeah.
But that's part of the beauty of it, you know, kind of despite all the odds, despite the obstacles, you know, just carrying things through. And obviously we also got a lot of help from people within the community.
That is very
true. That has to be acknowledged. With the score, you know, with people giving us access to things and all that kind of stuff, giving us extra time in the churches, all that stuff, and then on top of that, giving us lifts and all that, you know. So they were super helpful and super welcoming, and it was really nice to see it as well. Yeah, how the music helped forge those relationships. How do you feel? Obviously, having quite a body of work behind you, kind of, you know, if you started in 2019, that's essentially like 4 years of work before this, and obviously you've done other work since, and now you've been doing this masters. How do you feel Empathy in Eternity and the score that you wrote for it sits within your kind of wider portfolio?
I would put it on the more ambient side of things. I would say the difference if I made it now would maybe be, but I don't know, because I think the ambience suited the film, but I think I would want to put maybe more detail, more melody, or more sort of, or maybe I wouldn't. I'm not sure. I don't know. It's hard to know when you're not in the process, when you're not there. I mean, it sits within my body of work in film, of course, and I would say it because I used a lot of electronics, but it didn't have much of that. It's quite acoustic and organic in that way. So there's a couple of synthesizers in there. So it's on the acoustic side. I wouldn't say it's orchestral, it's more ensemble. And it has an emphasis on vocals as well. But I think it's within my usual personal style, I would say. It fits quite neatly in there. A little bit grungy at times, fairly ambient. Yeah.
I feel like, I'd listened to a lot of your discography beforehand, and I think the most immediate thing that you'd done before Empathy in Eternity, if I'm not mistaken, was like House on the Volcano.
Yeah.
Which is, was it Armenian?
Yes.
Yeah, the Armenian, and you directed the orchestra out there and stuff, didn't you?
Yes.
So, you know, sometimes like when because I've listened to other things since, and like messages to people and stuff that I'd listened to before as references and kind of inspirations, but I've listened to since more just like casually. and I can hear part of themes and certain sonic profiles that I do feel like kind of point towards that overarching personal style. I guess the other kind of question in terms of that is, how do you feel like the process compares to, for example, those kinds of films? For example, you've expressed to me before that this is among some of your favourite work that you've done, and it would be interesting to hear why that is, if that's still the case.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm not inventing things.
No, absolutely. I remember the moment remember the exact street I was walking along, and I hadn't listened to it in a little while, so I put it on, and it just brought everything back. And I suppose that is why it's my favorite. I think I always evaluate my music with the effect that it has on me, because I never truly know what effects it has on other people. And really, you shouldn't write for other people, you should always write for yourself. So if I'm the evaluator, and that's my own standard, if it's doing well emotionally within me, then I feel very happy about it. And it just brought everything back, all the emotions, all the detail, the place, the people, all the events that happened there. And I was like, I've definitely put my soul into this work, and that's why it's so available to me, those memories right now. And that's why I feel very proud of it, because it's come from within me. It's a part of me. I'm not writing music on a page, I'm giving you a part of myself. Yes, so it's very personal to me.
Was that also quite difficult for you to do?
It definitely had an impact on me, because obviously we have this shared history, and I think we've processed it in similar and different ways. Yes, it's very curious, because it happened when your father died when you were older, and I was much younger. So I think I look to you because you're almost able to get to these emotions, maybe a bit because you were older, you had the emotional intelligence to not just lock them away or get unhealthy coping mechanisms or whatever. But I was so much younger that I think I'm on a longer journey, if you see what I mean. So it was almost like you're further along in the journey of understanding, and I sort of saw ahead, if you see what I mean. I think that's probably what it was like. And I suppose in that way it's very inspiring and it's very moving. It could also be seen as troubling, because it's like, oh, have I felt that way? Am I meant to feel this way? But it is very moving, and I felt like I was going through your emotions with you at times. And yes, I mean, it's a lot. But it's also good to do. It's good to do.
And it led you somewhere, maybe,
very
a
much
bit
so.
further on that journey of understanding that you mentioned.
Definitely. And I think it still leads me. I think that process is lifelong, and this will always, it isn't just that happened, okay, so that happened. It will always be within my thoughts on this journey, if you see what I mean.
It's one of the many milestones that you'll have on that journey.
Yes,
nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it is a lifelong journey. I mean, I think as you grow older, like you said, there's the kind of pivotal difference of a age difference of when we experience that, but the kind of commonality is that there are, as you age and you go through different kind of stages of life, loss loses some of its older meanings and acquires other meanings. One example I thought of is when I went to a work interview and I didn't know how to do a tie properly, which I didn't really know how to do. I didn't really need to know how to do in school properly, because we were very messy. But it's just one of the things I thought of, like not something I would have had to do when I was younger. A small but kind of very poignant new dimension really helped me to do my tie for that interview.
That's
It's an honor, I suppose, to be part of that milestone, and it's it works both ways. I think I kind of, like I said to you earlier, irrevocably now associate your music with part of that journey of myself, and it's no coincidence that it comes to me randomly. You know, that it's very much embedded within me, and that I carry that too. And you know, I remember when, you know, the first day when we'd done the kind of first scenes in St Mary's in Burford, and you'd kind of composed, and James quickly put it together, and you know, we started watching. I just immediately started crying, and that was, you know, it was partly seeing the visual beauty of it and how it was captured by James, and obviously the place itself, and actually as a first time director seeing anything on camera, you know, especially that story. But it was really your music that triggered that, and I just think it shows again how much it is the glue of the film. You know, I really do think that without it, I think it would just be so much more kind of devoid of part of its poignancy, you know.
I just thought of something. I think actually that is why we make such a good team. Because it's more available to you emotionally. For context, I feel like my feelings around this are very like locked down deep somewhere that I struggle to access. Because it's with you personally, that's how you can make something as present as a visual understanding and expression of it. But I think music as a art form is extremely abstract, and that's how you can actually fill so much information. Like when I'm thinking about your music, I'm not thinking, okay, how do I do this ad? How do I do that? I don't think at all. Almost. It's like you switch everything conscious off, and just something comes out of like your gut intuition. And that's how I can speak. But you speak in a much more, this is how I'm feeling way. Does that make sense? It really makes sense in my head. And I think that's why you were the director, the writer, and in charge of the photography as well. And that's why I'm in the music.
But it all coalesces.
It all winds up in one thing. Yeah.
Nice. And yeah, the kind of screening side of things now that it is done. So we have some screenings coming up in London this month. I also have one up north before that, and then we have Tenbury Wells in August as well. We're in July now. But we did have an impromptu premiere in Oxford.
Yes.
One of your, what was it? Some sort of music showcase kind of thing.
Yes, it was. It was the Empress, which is an electronic music group. No, it wasn't. It was not that. It was a Red Lipstick Festival, which is a series of concerts to show any musical projects that are currently happening. They can be more experimental or just anything that you're working on. Red Lipstick is just a tradition of the originator of this series. He always used to wear red lipstick. And yeah, we screened it there, and quite a few people came actually, which was really nice. We had a good turnout, and we got some very good reviews there, which was wonderful. All very last minute.
Yeah, all very last
just
minute.
like, let's just screen it here in Oxford. we screened it in the Jacqueline Dupree building, which was really nice. It's a really nice space, big screen. And yeah, even my professor said he really liked it as well. Apparently he had a tough day, but actually it cheered him up, funnily enough.
Really?
Death. Death and funerals.
Yeah.
It makes everyone happy.
A bit of emotional escapism, hopefully.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
extract himself from his own pain and
Yeah.
imprint some of mine instead.
Yes, absolutely. And he enjoyed both the visuals and the music. So
yeah, that's good. And the kind
Good
of
stuff.
the rest of your friends, I guess, mostly like within the music stuff. What was their kind of feedback on your work?
Yeah, I mean, they found it very profound, very meditative, actually. Which was funny because the other parts of the show were quite experimental and extreme. So it kind of went really high energy to this like very mellow exploration of journey. Very calming, actually, I think is what a lot of people said, but equally as interesting factually and also very moving. That's what the general consensus, I would say, was.
Yeah, that's good. On top of the kind of music, I guess also the runtime, 40 minutes, which is somewhat unconventional from what I gather in terms of shorts.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of sits in between short and feature, at least for a lot of the festivals that I've seen. I feel like that's enough time to really pull people in, and you know, for the music to go on the length of the journey that it needs to go on, as well as the story and the visuals. So it's good that it kind of zened people out a little bit.
Very much so.
Nice.
But you have a very zen personality. I think you can't not come across in this film. I mean, as director, you are there. I mean, quite literally visually, but I mean energetically, and that really affects people. Everybody came out a little bit like Cameron from the screening.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
It's very much a good thing.
Nice. Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely the imprint is on it, and it's very interesting to observe that. And something that James said, you know, that he kind of hopes and anticipates that I'll find some sort of closure and curiosity and the kind of the ongoing lifespan of the film. And I think, you know, especially having more emotional distance from it, I think almost like the kind of emotional turmoil that we've pointed towards informing how you've done the score and informing obviously how I wrote the film, directed the film, is kind of less of a driving factor in my life now. So even myself, you know, I think I can appreciate it from a bit more of a distance and find that I am actually a bit closer to the meditative state, if you like, that people believe that I'm in, because I'm outwardly extremely relaxed and calm and, you know, even-headed maybe is like a good way of putting it. So I think I am those things, but the turmoil is so internal and doesn't show itself much, you know, on my face. But now it's actually kind of matched. But that is one thing I noticed, like looking back on it, you know, and I think it's matched by the music, is that there is a discrepancy between how I was then and how I am now. And I think that it's interesting that the music in a way is also a conduit for me to explore those feelings. You know, it doesn't, like you were just saying a minute ago, it doesn't end with the end of the film. It's an ongoing relationship and like evolution.
Yes, for sure.
And your score in a way is a benchmark against which I can measure that, you know, which is very cool.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I guess we were going to discuss was, you know, the kind of physical archivism that we're doing with your score, which is the dub plates. So I have my guy in South London, DJ Perception, who is you know, kind of a legend, a heavyweight of the garage scene, very well known DJ, producer, and dub plate maker. And I've been to him before, and I kind of approached him a few months ago, letting him know that I wanted to put your soundtrack on vinyl, which obviously, you know, you expressed a lot of excitement. You also said that that was the first time that this is going to happen. So what are your kind of thoughts and feelings on that?
I'm very excited. And we discussed this earlier about, I think there's a real, how to say it, it makes the music more valuable when you have to go through a process of playing it. It's very easy to cheapen music by just clicking on your phone and just playing on it. And I'm not saying it isn't appreciated, of course. But when you have to like get the record machine, turn it on, get the vinyl, you feel the vinyl in your hand, you can feel the texture if you want, you can see it. It's a physical thing. And then to put it on and it sounds a bit different because it's now on vinyl. Like it's a whole different process, which is beautiful. And I cannot wait to have that and to be able to hear it. I must come, because I don't have a machine to play it on, so I would like to come to your house. I'm inviting myself around so that we can play it.
A listening session.
Yeah.
A listening party.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's an antiquity to that as well. And to kind of hear that actually would be very interesting to listen to, because this is about something so old. I wonder if it would actually change the sort of, I suppose, timbre of the film, the score.
Yeah.
As we like, I wonder if we listen to that score whilst we're watching the visuals and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of the the listening experience, there's definitely a ritualism to it that I think is more befitting for the kind of quality, and also, as you say, the kind of nature itself of the score. On top of that, obviously, the medium, itself carries differences in kind of like EQ and all that stuff, which gives it a bit more warmth, so I think it always adds a kind of quality that cannot be replicated digitally.
Absolutely.
In terms of the sound itself as well. So, and I think that's, I mean, I'm a little bit biased in thinking that's always a positive thing, but I think especially with this kind of music, it's definitely going to add something to it.
Yeah, definitely.
And it was, I was saying to you, it was also really interesting to kind of coalesce this absolutely incredible, fascinating and incredibly musically diverse world of like UK, sound system culture, UK like 90s music, like jungle, drum and bass, garage, and everything that represents, particularly within London. People have been involved in things like pirate radio, dubplate culture, all that kind of stuff, and to coalesce that with something which is incredibly classical, also ambient, but rooted in those influences. It's really like the confluence of two worlds.
That is actually very true. I never thought about it like that. Because when you were describing the person who's going to actually cut the vinyls, I was like, wow, we must make extremely different music.
Definitely.
It was really interesting to hear his take on the film as well. And to know that it can reach people who prefer different genres of music as well. And that we can actually all sort of enjoy each other's different energies that we bring to the table. So that's very cool. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was, and it was absolutely incredible to be there and to be with him and to do it. And I think it's also kind of the fact that, across diverse kind of cultures of sound and cultures of art more widely, there is kind of the common thread, not only of mutual respect, but I think particularly within the kind of grassroots and underground sector, this kind of mutual aid almost, an appreciation for the kind of labour that goes into it. And, it's an incredibly powerful thing, obviously, to have those finished physical products, but also the process itself, I think, is incredibly magical. So it's, it felt like it's again one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I thought, this has to be done. And it was really great to see him involved. So we've kind of covered the main bases, I think.
Cool.
Yeah, we've got our screenings coming up this month in London and next month in Tenbury, which you'll be coming to.
Absolutely. You've done a fantastic job of distributing all of the films. I'm so glad it's going to reach as many people as it will do.
Yeah. How are you feeling about going back to Tenbury?
I'm feeling melancholic.
Oh.
That was a certain time of our life, and with certain emotions and certain feelings. And even though it hasn't been so long, so much has happened during that time. That's a different person who lived there now, and I have to go and say hi to her, which is lovely, and also scary and sad that not happy. All of those things, many things. And you have to revisit the version of yourself that was there as well.
Very true. Very true.
How are you feeling about seeing him?
It's very difficult to anticipate how it will be. I think there's a mixture of, and I mean, I keep saying to people, I can't tell to what degree it's a sense of closure or overexposure. I've obviously supervised the editing process, and that means that I've watched a completely finished version of the film at least 25 times.
Oh, wow.
But also unfinished versions of the film, and the early edits and the assembly and so on. I don't know how many times, I don't know how many hours I spent doing that. A lot. And so, there's part of me which, because of the film, I think I've emotionally found closure, and also more widely in life, as you say, so much just happens in that span of time anyway.
Right.
That I think in many ways I have moved on, and I see this as the kind of final step in kind of closure essentially. At the same time, notwithstanding the kind of emotional distance to some degree, a healthy one, that I feel from the project and from that kind of very depressed mental state in which I made it. There's nevertheless an element of unknowability, and how am I going to feel when I revisit those places, as you say, as the person that I am now, but also as I engage with a finished product and the community that receives that, whether that's up north or in London or in Tenbury. And I anticipate that all of those will be different experiences. I think that Southport will be quite quiet, that there'll be some family there, hopefully a few random locals, maybe one or two friends. I think that London will be a lot of friends, and I think that Tenbury will be obviously all the friends we made there, and maybe some new ones. All of those will have different emotional impacts, but who knows? I really don't know. I think it'll probably be very difficult, and in some senses I take it in stride. I've spoken to certain people who say they're very inspired by the fact that I'm putting on the screenings and inviting everyone and displaying all that vulnerability, and in a way I kind of take it in stride because it's what has to be done. At least that's how I perceive it. But when it's actually happening, I'm sure it'll be very emotionally charged and intense, but I wouldn't repress any of those feelings, because other projects I've done, other gigs I've done, and just life in general, the power that constituted this film, the power that ultimately made you want to be involved, the power that made me want to be involved, is just incredibly moving and gives so much meaning to life. And I think that will be ultimately what interests people who were there.
I agree.
The poignancy. So
I agree.
I'll just be on display.
You'll be on display indeed.
Essentially. But yeah, we'll see. I really look forward to sharing it with Tenbury. I think that'll be really special, and it's obviously been something I've been working towards for so long, but when it's actually there, I just think the sense of historical justice will be, just amazing. And then I can kind of, like I said to one or two people, lay some things at my father's grave and just say it's done. Do you know what I mean? So I look forward to that moment, but that once that's done, that something incredibly powerful has also come to an end. So you have to let go, and you have to move on. So it will be all of these incredibly intertwined and difficult things, and I think that will be very interesting for myself, for others. But I also look forward to just championing everyone else who's been involved, like yourself and James and B and Gonzalo, and having them all at the screening, at least in London, and thanking everyone and giving them things, and just bigging them up essentially, and just having good time together. My mum will be down as well.
I would love to meet her.
You'll meet her. It's all family essentially.
That's lovely.
And that's what this stuff is very beautiful for as well. It's the power to bring people together and celebrate life, as the film does as well.
Definitely.
So I think on that note, time for us to go celebrate.
Time for us to go celebrate.
Have a drink. Yeah. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah, if anyone has listened or watched, thank you very much for your attention, and I hope it's been interesting. Empathy and Eternity is probably online by the time you watch that interview, and if not, just let me know and I'm sure I can get it to you. Take care of yourselves, lots of love, and thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Right.
High five. Oh, you left me hanging.